Okay, let's unpack this. Because imagine you are opening up a 1,500-year-old tomb, and it belongs to this ancient, just incredibly powerful ruler.
Right, a total absolute monarch.
Exactly. And you find gold, you find these exquisite textiles, and as is sometimes the case in these kinds of ancient societies, you find a human sacrifice, right, meant to accompany the ruler into the afterlife.
Which is, grim, but historically not entirely uncommon.
Not uncommon at all. But then you run a cutting-edge genetic analysis on those remains, and you discover that the sacrificed child wasn't like a prisoner of war or a captured slave. It was the ruler's own niece.
Yeah, that kind of discovery just completely fractures our modern understanding of family loyalty and political power. It really forces us to ask these terrifying questions about what human beings are actually capable of when a select few hold absolute control over a society.
And that is exactly the kind of uncomfortable, totally paradigm-shifting reality we are exploring today. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore the life, the philosophy, and the groundbreaking discoveries of archaeologist Jeff Quilter.
Yeah, his work is just incredible.
It really is. We are going to see how studying the ancient past is actually the key to understanding our modern world's most daunting challenges. We're looking at everything from massive climate shifts and extreme wealth inequality to the brutal mechanics of ancient elite power. And crucially, we'll explore why the way we tell stories about the past matters just as much as the physical artifacts we pull from the dirt.
Definitely. And to do this, we are synthesizing a really fascinating stack of sources for you today. We're pulling from biographical articles written by Quilter's former colleagues, excerpts from his own highly vivid books, a recorded presentation breaking down his core academic philosophy,
And the big one.
yeah, the real centerpiece of our discussion today, which is a groundbreaking genetic study published just this past December in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, or PNAS.
But before we jump into all of that, a quick note for you, our listener. Because our sources today dig into concepts like massive climate shifts and extreme wealth inequality, which obviously, intersect with some pretty intense modern political debates. We want to make it completely clear that we are not taking any political sides here.
Right, absolutely not.
We aren't endorsing specific viewpoints. Our goal is strictly to impartially report on the data and the ideas contained in this source material, giving you the raw information to just weigh for yourself.
So, to get started, let's start the clock in 1985. Jeff Quilter is a young assistant professor at Ripon College in Wisconsin. And for context on his environment, Ripon is a tiny liberal arts school.
Super small.
Yeah, at the time, it had maybe 800 students and about 70 faculty members. So Quilter is really in the crucible of early academia, hustling for tenure, which basically means every time the academic term breaks, he's flying down to Peru to run excavations.
And his students apparently viewed him as the real-life Indiana Jones, which I just love because it carries this brilliant bit of irony considering Harrison Ford, the actor who defined that cinematic trope, actually attended Ripon College.
I know, it's such a weird historical coincidence.
Right. But Quilter's own origin story is completely detached from Hollywood glamour or legacy academia. He actually grew up in New York City. His father was a South African immigrant who worked as a waiter, and his mother was a GI war bride.
Yeah, so a very working class background.
Exactly. His entry point into this entire world wasn't a prestigious prep school. It was just this innate, obsessive curiosity that led him to become a junior curator at the Brooklyn Children's Museum when he was just a kid.
And I think that outsider perspective, that sort of foundational curiosity, it seemed to inoculate him against some of the more stifling traditions of his field.
Stifling's a good word for it.
Because he developed this fierce rebellion against the way archaeological findings were typically published, he looked at standard academic site reports, which, frankly, often read like endless spreadsheets of soil stratigraphy and grid coordinates, and he questioned why the human past was being systematically drained of its humanity.
Yeah, he decided to basically prove that rigorous science didn't have to be excruciating to read. While he was working on a book called The Cobble Circles and Standing Stones, which detailed his excavations at the Rivas site in Costa Rica.
Which is a ceremonial center, right?
Yeah, a ceremonial center that actually featured a fabled gold-filled cemetery called the Panteón de la Reina. Anyway, he told a colleague he was going to make the site report entertaining, and the colleague essentially laughed it off as an impossible task.
But he proved that colleague wrong. He structured the academic text as a first-person adventure. He didn't just log the artifacts, he placed the reader in the visceral, chaotic environment of the expedition itself.
Oh my gosh, there is this Fantastic excerpt from the book where he just abandons the sterile academic tone entirely to describe the sheer sensory overload of taking a bus in Costa Rica.
Oh, I love that part.
It's so good. He meticulously catalogs the crowded sidewalks, the pickpockets weaving through clumps of schoolgirls, the long-haired Californian surfers dragging their boards, Canadian eco-tourists, Latter-day Saints on mission, and, as he wryly notes, occasionally archaeologists.
Such a great image.
It is. He effectively forces the reader to see the archaeologist not as a detached observer, but as just one more character navigating the messy, vibrant middle of humanity.
Oh.
But I have to push back on this approach a little bit here.
Okay, go for it.
If the underlying data is accurate and the radiocarbon dates are correct, does the narrative packaging really matter? Like, shouldn't empirical facts speak for themselves in a scientific discipline?
Well, what's fascinating here is that Quilter viewed narrative not as a stylistic luxury, but as a strict ethical obligation. His philosophy was that information existing in a vacuum is virtually useless.
Really? An ethical obligation.
Yeah, because think about it. If a researcher spends a decade uncovering a crucial truth about human history, but only writes it in a language decipherable by 10 other specialists and the granting agency that funded them, they have fundamentally failed the public.
Oh, I see. They have effectively reburied the artifact in a journal instead of the ground.
That is the perfect way to phrase it. Quilter argued that archaeologists, more than anyone else, should understand the mechanics of legacy. Raw data does not survive across centuries. Stories do.
Right.
Narrative is the primary vehicle humankind uses to sustain imagination and transfer wisdom from one generation to the next. If you strip the narrative out of the archaeological record, you strip away its meaning and its accessibility to the very people who need to learn from it.
So the story is the delivery mechanism for the truth. That makes sense. That covers the how of his methodology. But the what is where the stakes get incredibly high. Because if the goal of the discipline isn't just cataloging fabled cemeteries, even if he happened to excavate one, what is the ultimate diagnostic purpose of all this digging?
Well, Quilter's career trajectory really mirrors his expanding view of that purpose. He eventually transitions from that small college environment to the absolute pinnacle of the field, serving as the Howells Director of Harvard's Peabody Museum of Archaeology and Ethnology from 2012 to 2019.
Which is a huge deal.
A massive deal. Yet, even from that vantage point, he noted this frustrating paradox. The public loves the aesthetic of archaeology. They love the Indiana Jones movies. But the discipline itself remains chronically underfunded.
It's all flash and no cash.
Exactly. And he argues this is a profound societal oversight because archaeology operates as the science of the human past.
Meaning it is the only scientific discipline with a wide enough lens to study our macro behaviors. It allows us to step back and look at why we continually build societies characterized by extreme poverty, concentrated wealth, and highly asymmetrical distributions of power.
Right, it gives us the data on our own recurring cycles. And the sources provide a brilliant, highly relevant example of this regarding climate change.
Okay, tell me about that.
Back in 1984, so long before climate modeling was a daily headline, Quilter delivered a presentation at Ripon College focusing on the El Niño weather phenomenon. A former colleague, Top Encina, actually contributed to our source material and recalled being completely bewildered by the topic.
I'm bewildered.
Because in 1984, the prevailing consensus treated El Niño as a minor, localized 7-year cycle that, just temporarily disrupted South American fishing yields.
Oh, so it wasn't seen as a big deal. But Quilter steps up to the podium and shatters that consensus. He presents hard archaeological evidence of a mega El Niño event that struck around 1300 AD.
And it wasn't just rain.
No, he doesn't just show that it rained heavily. He demonstrates that the resulting ecological devastation caused a staggering 77% of the pre-flood settlements in Peru's Osmore Valley to be completely abandoned.
77%.
We are talking about the sudden, catastrophic vanishing of an established population. So, what does this all mean? And I'll play devil's advocate here for a second. If I want to understand how El Niño functions today, I'm going to look at a meteorologist running an atmospheric supercomputer.
Sure.
Why should we rely on someone analyzing ancient dirt to understand a modern climate shift? Isn't that sort of overstepping the bounds of anthropology?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the distinction between atmospheric science and archaeology becomes the key to our actual survival. A meteorologist can model the physical event. They can predict the ocean temperatures, the barometric pressure drops, and the volume of rainfall.
Right.
But a supercomputer cannot predict what happens to our social contracts when the grocery store shelves go empty.
Ah, I see. The physical data versus the behavioral data.
Precisely. Archaeology provides the ultimate long-term data set on human societal collapse and resilience. When Quilter examines the strata of the Osmore Valley, he is mapping out the failure points of an ancient infrastructure.
He can see exactly when political systems buckle under ecological stress.
Exactly. The archaeological record proves that when a climate shifts drastically, populations don't just endure it. Institutions fail, violent migrations occur, and massive percentages of the population simply do not survive the bottleneck.
It is the difference between knowing a Category 5 hurricane is going to make landfall and knowing exactly how a city's population turns on itself when the power grid and water supply fail for 6 months. The soil gives us the human behavioral response to the atmospheric data.
And because Quilter operates on the premise that humanity constantly repeats its history, that behavioral data is terrifyingly relevant today.
Because we're facing similar shifts.
Right. If we want to understand the stress fractures in our modern, hyper-complex global society when faced with a sudden climate shock, we have to study the societies that have already endured one and failed.
That brings us to the second major recurring human issue Quilter focuses on, which is the extremely asymmetrical distribution of power. Because when resources vanish, hierarchies tend to harden.
They absolutely do.
What actually happens to human psychology and family dynamics when a tiny elite holds absolute, unquestionable control over the masses?
To investigate the pathology of absolute power, Quilter dedicated a significant portion of his research to the Moshe people of ancient Peru. And this culminated in his definitive book, The Moshe of Ancient Peru, Media and Messages.
And his approach at the Peabody Museum was really unique here, wasn't it?
Very. He analyzed their incredible artifacts through a dual lens, so he admired their aesthetic mastery while simultaneously ruthlessly decoding what those artifacts reveal about the raw, often brutal reality of lived human experience under a theocracy.
Which brings us directly to the December 2024 PNAS paper. This is where Quilter's lifelong pursuit of the human story merges with the absolute bleeding edge of modern genetics.
Yeah, this study is wild.
His team analyzed a specific, highly elite Moshe burial site from roughly 500 CE, the tomb of the Senora de Cacao.
The Senora de Cacao was a woman of immense status. She was interred with staggering wealth, complex offerings, and critically, a juvenile human sacrifice meant to accompany her into the afterlife.
Here's where it gets really interesting. You and I were looking through the methodology of this study, and the science they used to decode this tomb is just staggering.
Well, that's next level.
They didn't just look at the bones. They sequenced the DNA and ran isotopic analyses on all 6 individuals found within this specific burial context. And the DNA results proved that all 6 people in that tomb were biologically related,
forming a single family tree that spanned at least 4 generations.
The implications of that are chilling. The juvenile sacrifice to accompany the Senora de Cacao wasn't some anonymous captive. It was likely her own niece.
Yeah, and we study ancient sacrifices across numerous cultures, and usually it's prisoners of war, indentured servants, or specific religious castes.
Right.
But sacrificing your own niece, how does an act that horrific fit into a family structure or a political system? It requires a total reevaluation of what family even meant to these elites.
It really does.
This raises an important question about how absolute power warps fundamental human bonds. In the Moshe elite class, political authority and religious divinity were indistinguishable.
The rulers were perceived as living gods.
Exactly.
Right.
When a family holds that magnitude of asymmetrical power, their relatives cease to be just loved ones. They transform into political currency and tools for ritual display.
It completely reframes the violence. Sacrificing a close relative isn't just an act of brutality, it is the ultimate terrifying flex of status.
The total flex.
The ruling family is essentially signaling to the populace, our bloodline is so vital to the maintenance of the cosmos that we can and must offer up our own children to keep the universe turning.
It is a completely undocumented form of ritual sacrifice among the Mosh. And the way the researchers piece together the interpersonal dynamics of this family using isotopic analysis is just a masterclass in forensic archaeology.
The isotope data is brilliant because it acts like a biochemical wiretap.
Oh, I love the isotope data.
I know you do. But for those of you listening who might not be familiar with the mechanics of this, as you grow, your body absorbs the chemical signatures of the food you eat and the water you drink.
Right, elements like strontium replace calcium in your skeleton.
effectively locking a geographic and dietary receipt into your bones and teeth.
It is literally recording where you lived. They specifically measured the carbon and nitrogen isotopes to track the individual's diets. And the analysis revealed that most of the family members had nearly identical isotopic signatures.
Indicating a diet heavily reliant on maize and marine proteins, right?
Yes. This tells us they all shared a childhood environment, growing up together in or around the Chicama Valley.
But the sacrificed niece's isotopic signature was entirely different.
Drastically different. Even though her DNA proved she was biologically a niece, her bones proved she had a completely distinct geographic origin and diet during her formative years.
So she wasn't raised in the family compound.
No, she wasn't. And this specific detail cracks open the political reality of the Moshe Empire. It strongly suggests that elite families were geographically dispersed to forge political alliances or control different valleys.
So they were sending kids away.
Exactly. The niece might have been sent away to be raised by a rival faction, or perhaps she was the product of a strategic marriage in a distant region. Yet, at the critical moment of the Señora de Cao's death, she is summoned back.
Or perhaps called in as a grim political debt.
Exactly. Called in to serve this ultimate fatal purpose.
It takes the abstract, academic concept of a Moshe elite hierarchy and translates it into a visceral, deeply unsettling family drama. You have bone chemistry acting as a 1,500-year-old ledger for political hostage situations and arranged marriages. I love how excited you get about bone chemistry, by the way.
I can't help it. It's basically an ancient wiretap. But really, it perfectly validates Quilter's entire philosophy.
How so?
Well, the researchers used the most rigorous sterile data imaginable, strontium isotopes and mitochondrial DNA, to uncover a profoundly human story.
Oh, I see.
It's a narrative about the pathology of power, the distortion of family, and the terrifying extremes human beings will justify when they sit at the absolute pinnacle of an unequal society.
It really is the ultimate synthesis of his career. We have tracked this journey from a young professor digging in the mud of Peru, just trying to secure tenure, to writing vivid, rebellious accounts of Costa Rican bus rides, to directing the Peabody Museum.
It's been quite a ride.
And it culminates with him utilizing the absolute frontier of genetic science to expose the darkest secrets of an ancient empire.
Which brings us to why this deep dive matters for you, the listener, right now. Quilter's life work demands that we start viewing history as a collection of dusty ceramics isolated in museum display cases. History is a mirror.
A mirror for us.
Exactly. When we analyze how the Osmore Valley population collapsed under a mega El Nino, or how the Mochi elites weaponized their own bloodlines to maintain power, we are not studying alien species. We are studying the extreme edges of our own human nature under pressure.
We are studying the blueprints of our own survival, and honestly, our own capacity for cruelty. Which leaves us with a provocative thought to mull over.
Okay, let's hear it.
We began this discussion by talking about the importance of narrative. How we need storytellers to translate ancient artifacts into a language we can understand. But imagine that timeline reversed.
Oh, projecting the science of the human past into the future.
Exactly. Imagine an archaeologist 1,500 years from now excavating our current society. The irony of our era is that we produce more data than any civilization in history, yet our storage methods like hard drives, cloud servers, magnetic tape, they degrade incredibly fast.
That's true. They don't last like stone or gold.
1,000 years from now, our digital footprint will likely be gone. We won't leave behind a preserved record of our art, our emails, or the stories of our daily lives.
The digital record vanishes, leaving only the physical realities of our industrial footprint.
Right. They will dig through the sediment and find the physical artifacts of our extreme wealth disparities. They will find a geologic layer of microplastics, the isotopic signatures of our changing climate locked in our bones, and the radioactive remnants of our energy grids.
Wow.
If future archaeologists only have our toxic waste and our mass-produced garbage to look at, completely devoid of our poetry, our humor, and our humanity, what story will those artifacts tell about us?
Will we look like a culture of mindless, destructive consumption?
Exactly. Without our stories to protect us, will we look as alien and terrifying to them as the Moshe elites do to us?